Hello, I'm Alfonso Severos from Second Saturday. Right now, you are watching Health and Wellness with Rose and Green.
Can't keep doing the same things over and over again and expect a different result. And we have to have clear thinking, so we have to have the nerves flowing properly. So the spine is very important. So the spine needs to be corrected.
And I think generally, globally, that's where the world is heading.
Welcome to another episode of Health and Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Rosen Green. Today's episode, we'll be speaking with Don Simmons. He'll be sharing an inspiring and empowering story. Let's take a look.
My name is Don Simmons. I am 58 years old.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you,
Well,
share your story.
and thank you that you came. I'm really, really blessed and humbled. Really, really humbled.
For persons who don't know who Don is, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my passion is writing. I've been writing poetry since like the spring of 1986 or the spring of 1987. So that's about like 36 years that I've been writing poetry. I started writing poetry just like on a lark. I was incarcerated in Brooklyn many years ago. And this young man, I guess we were about the same age because I was about 20 going on 21. And he was really happy that he had written this poem and he wanted me to read it. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. I had never read a poem in my life. I've seen a couple poems but never read one. But on this particular day, I felt in my heart that I could actually read this young man's poem and give him a critique. So I remember I read the poem, and it was a good poem. I don't remember what it's about. But after I read it, there was a little voice inside me that says, I can write better than this. So that was the day, all those years ago, in the spring of '86, that I started writing poetry. And I haven't looked back since. I didn't think that I'd be writing poetry in 2023. I only wrote one poem this year. But even if you write one poem a year, it's better than nothing, you know? Because my health has been a little bit fragile in the last several years. So sometimes the volume of the output might be a little bit less. But I'm going to make sure I put my best foot forward when I write something.
Talk to me a little bit about your childhood. What was Don the child like?
Inquisitive, not very loud, kind of like on the shy side. But I love school. But school for me was like kind of a torment because I was always bullied. You know, I started getting bullied, in fifth grade, fourth grade. And it continued all the way to ninth grade. That was a lot of years to be bullied. I could have crawled into a shell and just closed everything out, but I didn't let that define me. I felt that I could still be a worthy person even if I was bullied, you know? It wasn't trying to show the bullies that I was better. Maybe it was trying to show the bullies that they're not gonna break me. And I didn't let them break me. But it was hard sometimes, you know? It was very hard. I love academics. I've loved reading since I was a young man. I have read thousands of comic books in my life. I've read many, many books, some great books, very renowned books. And I always had this yearning in my heart to be a writer. I didn't know that many years later that I would be a writer, but that fire was lit one day when a girl got an award in school for writing, and I was not the one that got that award. I felt kind of slighted. You know, I was like, I'm a good writer too. But, you know, everything happens in God's time. And God has his own timetable. But everything that God does is perfect timing. If we are faithful enough to wait for God's timing, we'll see the fruits of our labor in time.
Before the Don now, the adult, in terms of how active were you as a child coming up as a teenager and even a young adult? What sports, what did you enjoy doing outside of writing?
I was always captivated by martial arts. So in some way or form, I've been associated with martial arts since I was a young man. The combat side of martial arts is pretty damn easy. It doesn't take much to throw a punch, but the breathing part of martial arts is very hard to attain. And that's what I've been working on for many, many years. I was inspired by Bruce Lee movies, as everybody was back in those times. I even had the Kung Fu uniform, the Chinese slippers, and everything. I had a pair of nunchucks. And but I've always loved the culture. I've always loved the culture of martial arts, Chinese people and their culture, and the philosophy and lifestyle of what a martial artist is truly supposed to be about. I've always embraced that. I wasn't really a sports type person. My father wanted us to play basketball, but I just really wasn't into it. Now, I played stickball when I was young. The stickball is very popular in most neighborhoods. I played a little softball. I was mediocre softball. But my whole thought process always gravitated toward books.
Yeah.
That's where I've always been that way. I've always been like kind of like a cerebral person.
Right.
You know, to think a little bit more deeply than the average person.
Yeah.
Not better than the average person, but just more deeply than the average person.
Right.
Even to this day, what I think about on a daily basis, I don't think people would be able to really comprehend it. You know? Because I think very deeply about life and living. I think deeply about my friends.
Right.
And about my family. And about the plight of the world.
Yeah.
Where do I fit in with all of that?
Yeah.
So I feel that now, I feel like it's my responsibility as a writer, especially a writer of color,
Right.
to be exemplary than other writers.
Right. Right.
Because writers of color are always put under a smaller microscope than everybody else is. So I have to stand out from the crowd. Loretta Lynn said you have to be best, better, or different.
Right.
So I choose to be different.
Right.
In whatever direction the world is going, and I don't want to go in that direction. I want to go the other way. Yes.
Talk to me about your family dynamic. How was family, how was home for you growing up?
Well, home life was a little bit hard, you know. My dad was a little bit angry when we were young, you know, and that kind of rubbed off on the dynamics of the family.
Right.
However, my dad was a great provider. I don't ever remember being hungry as a child.
Right.
We maybe didn't have the brand name clothes, but we had good clothes that cost money,
Right.
you know. And we always looked good when we went to school. But I was always sad as a child because I felt like that I couldn't talk to my father. You know, my father was not the kind of person to be effusively emotional. Like he wouldn't say that I love you, or he wouldn't really hug us a lot. But he cared about our mental well-being, and he wanted us to be good in school because my dad, I think that he went to the 6th grade, and he didn't go any further. But my dad was a great reader, and he was the one who taught me how to read.
So it rubbed off.
Yeah, it did. I was always inspired by my father by how well he could articulate, and I wanted to be that way as well. I wanted to make him proud of me. So that's why I gravitated toward books. It's just a natural progression.
Yeah. Talk to me about being a young adult. What was the struggles that you had to face and go through and overcome?
Well, when I was younger, you know, there was some abuse in my home. And I got to the point when I was about 15 years old where I didn't really want to deal with that anymore. So I started running away from home. Sometimes, not when I was younger, but as I got older, I would stay out of my house longer and longer and longer. But I didn't feel like I wanted to be like beat or hurt by the person that's supposed to love me. Even though I love my father with all my heart, I didn't really want to go through that anymore. So I started hanging out on 42nd Street. And if you know anything about 42nd Street in the 80s, it was really a bad place. It was really not the place that you wanted a young person to be. So basically, 42nd Street raised me. It made me into a man. Cause either you put up and fight or you run. So I got to the point where I wasn't really trying to run anymore. So I just started to face things head on. But being homeless was very hard. I remember times that I starved on the street. I remember times that I had to go to soup kitchens to eat. Could I have went back home to my mom and my dad? Yes, but I was just looking for something else. I don't really know what that something else was. Just more affection, I guess. And even though I really didn't find that affection on the street either, it was just better for me to be there than to be at home. And the thing that saved me on the street was that I was always articulate. I could always read, I could always understand, and I could always speak well. So being a young person on the street, I always listened to older people, to how they spoke, to how they carried themselves, and I watched them. And I adjusted my behavior accordingly. Things didn't always work out like that. I was hurt several times on the street, beat up, robbed. And then in 1986, I got addicted to crack cocaine. And that was like a really big deal in my life. It was like dramatic and tragic. And ultimately, being on crack cocaine led me going to prison twice. You know, when I first got locked up in 1980, I think 89, I went to prison for the first time. I had been in different jails, but I had never been upstate, which is prison. But I wasn't scared because I had seen so many movies about prison. I already knew how to act and what not to do, what not to say. But prison is a very lonely place. And there's no love there. Did I make some friends there? I made some friends there, but I made my circle very, very tight. And I never stepped outside of that circle because in prison, you don't want to be associated with a rapist or a child molester. You don't want to be associated with homosexuality. You don't want to be a sneak thief. You don't want to be a big willie or a gangster, because those are the ones that get killed the fastest. So I always looked inside myself to get through prison. You know, I'll always look to my intelligence to get through it. And hopefully that the people that I met over the course of 2 incarcerations, I've hoped that I had some impact on them in a positive way. And I've had people tell me that.
Yeah. You had some triumphs, even though in those trials of being locked up in prison, you gained some achievements. Talk to me about getting your GED and going to college while incarcerated.
Well, in 1980, I guess 1989, I guess it was, I decided if I'm going to be in prison, I might as well try to get my GED. I tried to get my GED one time before when I was in Philadelphia locked up, but I wound up getting released before I even got a chance to take one class. So when I went upstate, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my GED. And that was my focus. A lot of people didn't think that I was going to get my GED because I used to fall asleep in the class. And they didn't think I was listening, but I heard everything the teacher said. So sometimes, excuse me, sometimes he would say something. I would raise my head off the table, answer his question, and go right back to sleep. And everybody was in shock. Like, how did he hear that? How did he know that? But I always knew that if you paid attention in school, when I did go to school, which was very seldomly, I very rarely went to high school. But I knew that if you had a good retention of things and memory, that the GED would be relatively easy. And I was confident that I could pass. My math is a little shoddy. I never liked math. I don't like algebra or geometry or calculus or trigonometry, but you could never cheat me in the store. Yeah, excuse me. My mom never let us have a calculator in the house. She never let us count on our fingers. She said, count in your head. And to this day, I still count numbers in my head to this day. And that's because of my mom. She said, learn your times tables. If you learn your timetables, that's the key to all other math for the most part. And so, the results came back in. You only needed a what did you need? Like a 225 to pass. I got a 262, which is one of the highest scores in the facility that I was in. I didn't get a chance to get the free dictionary because I wound up going to another facility. And So that was my first incarceration in prison. I had many incarcerations like in jail. So I really never thought when I came home in 1991, I never thought that I'd ever go back to prison again. But if you don't change your environment, if you don't change the people that you hang around, you're going to repeat the cycle over and over again, which is exactly what happened to me. I started making fast money. The money came pretty easy. But then I got caught into that same vortex, man, of doing drugs again. And I remember when I started doing crack cocaine again, it was just devastating. It was devastating. So I came out of prison in 1991. I stayed out for like 1992, and by 1993 I had got locked up again. And this time, they wanted to give me 8 1/3 to 25 years. And I wasn't trying to see that.
Right.
So anyway, I got sort of a break. I got 10 to 20, you know? And I said to myself, if I'm going to go to prison for 10 years, I'm going to go to college. I said, you know, I don't want to go to college to get smart. I want to go to college to enhance what I already have. So I applied to go to college, and the academic supervisor, she didn't feel as if I was college material, because when I was at the reception of prison, they gave you tests to take, math, reading, and so forth, and I didn't do well. But I said to her that I just got 10 to 20 years. The last thing I'm trying to think about is reading and writing. I said, but my reading is excellent. I said, I'm a writer. My reading is excellent. And I said, I can do basic math. She still wanted me to take some tests, and I refused. I was like, no, I'm not going to take any tests. So she said, well, okay, I'm not going to put you in college. And I said, fine. And I got up to walk toward the door, and she stopped me. She said, okay. She said, I'll put you in college, but you better not disappoint me. Right. So in the back of my mind, I always heard her words reverberate, you better not disappoint me. So I knew that I just couldn't be an average student. I had to be above average. So then my first semester of college, I had a 2.87 grade point average, and I made the president's list.
Wow, that's excellent.
And that happened in prison. So people can't tell me that if you go to prison that you can't achieve. You have to want to achieve. You just can't just stay there and do nothing for 10 or 20 years. So I got 3 semesters of college. And then later on in my incarceration, the New York Theological Seminary came to Fishkill with a certificate program. So I decided, you know, what the heck, let me do it. I'm bored. I wanted to go back to that kind of a school setting. So I enrolled in the Theological Seminary. It was very hard. It was a lot of tests, a lot of quizzes, and a lot of presentations, like all the time, you know? But I felt that I had the wherewithal, that I could do it. With God's help, that I could do anything. So I prayed to the Lord that I would keep my faith while in the seminary, because there's a lot of things that they teach you in the seminary that if you don't have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, you come out an atheist. And I was determined that that was not going to happen to me. So I studied hard, and I wrote a lot of papers, and also I wrote papers for other people. But that was incumbent upon one thing. If I felt that writing your paper was going to affect mine, I wasn't going to do it. If I knew that I could write my paper and still help you with your paper, yes, I would do that. I help many people like that. What I didn't like, why, if you have a paper to write, why would you do it on the day that it's due? That's the worst thing you can do. And people did that all the time. So now you're rushing and you're trying to cram words. And, you know, for instance, there was a paper that we had to write about something about theology, but it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was about seeing theology not from a rich person's perspective, but from a poor person's perspective, from seeing religion from the bottom up, as opposed from the top down. Oh, liberation theology. So we had to read the whole book of Job. That was the assignment. We had to read the book of Job. He gave us 36 questions to answer after we read the book of Job. And he said that if you wrote the paper in the form of a sermon, you would get extra credit. So the minute I got back, I started writing the paper. I started writing my thoughts down. Nothing was working out. And then one day, it's like I had a dream. I'm laying in the bed and God gave it to me. I just figured out, man, how to write this paper.
Yeah.
And I went back and I told everybody, yo, I figured it out. I don't think they believed me because it was such a daunting task to write this paper. But I remember he said that if your paper is under 20 pages, you will fail this class. That's what he told us. So I wrote a 25-page paper. So, you know, in college, you skip a line. There's double space. So we didn't have a typewriter, but you still had to skip double space when you wrote. But 25 pages is still a lot of paper with double spacing. It's still a lot to write. So I wrote the paper, I answered the 36 questions, and I wrote it in the form of a sermon. So I made 24 and a half out of 25 points, which is like about a 99.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Everybody was like looking at me like I was crazy. But I got like the highest score on the paper in the class. Yeah. And I was really proud about that.
You had a lot of achievements.
I did.
Even in the midst of a lot of trials that you go through.
Yes.
Because now your health
Yes.
has been affected.
It has
I
been.
want you to speak on that as it relates to when your health started failing, what transpired before your heart started.
Well, the first thing that happened, I was walking in Midtown Manhattan in 1992. It was nighttime, and somebody stabbed me in the heart. Like some guy, some disturbed person just stabbed me right through the heart. I still have the scar right there over my heart. And so they said that I died like 3 or 4 times in the ambulance, and they were able to bring me back. And like the LAD, which is I think the lower ascending, a lower something, it's the artery, one of the main arteries of the heart. It got completely cut in half. And 99% of the people that sustain that kind of damage to the heart, they don't survive. I don't know why I survived, but I did. I remember opening up my eyes 3 days later and I had all these tubes, like everywhere. They had me sedated though, so I was kind of like out of it, but I could feel the tubes all over my body. 8 days in the hospital, they let me go home with no health care. Nothing, no aftercare. The only thing they did was take out the stitches from the operation. They gave me no other kind of care at all. So, fast forward, because that happened in 1992 in September. Fast forward to 1993 is when I went to prison. And like around 1995 in prison, I remember I was playing basketball. And I remember I became so out of breath that I thought I was actually going to die on the basketball court. I had to actually lay down on the basketball court because I was just so tired. I didn't realize that my heart was still healing. So I didn't really think that I was going to really be able to work out. But after, I don't know, maybe several months, I started working out again. I had a heavy workout. I was able to lift 525 pounds off the floor with no warm-up. With no warm-up and no belt. Just some good chalk on the hands, a good bar, a good grip on the bar, and strength. And I did it. And I worked out like every single day I worked out in prison. Every day. Even when it was raining, though it was hard. If it wasn't raining too hard, I'd still go out. The only time I couldn't really work out if it was raining too hard because the weight would slip off the bar. And that could be dangerous. But I would still go out. I remember one time it was about 100 degrees. And the officer came to me and said, we were going to send you to the box today. I said, for what reason? He said, because it's 100 effing degrees out here and you're out here working out. I said, yeah, but I work out all the time. But they thought I was high on something, but I wasn't. I was just high on working out. Yeah. And so I did my 10 years in prison. I felt very strong when I came home from prison. Mentally strong, physically strong. But for some reason, my mother told me, she said, when you walk up the stairs, she said, I can hear you wheezing. I said, no, that can't be true. I'm strong. I just came home. And my mother wanted me to go to the doctor, so I did. I went to a neighborhood clinic. And he told me that my EKG was very abnormal. So I said, well, I know it's abnormal because I was stabbed. He said, well, I still want you to go to a cardiologist. So I went to Wyckoff Medical Center in Brooklyn. And I was there for a while, for a few hours. Nobody's saying anything to me. Nobody's coming to talk to me. So I started to get a little nervous. I was like, why hasn't nobody came to talk to me yet? I see people peeking around the corner. They're pointing at me. They're talking. And then finally they came over to me and said, Mr. Simmons, your EKG is abnormal. And I said the same thing. I was stabbed. They said, no, it's more than that. And they sent me to Columbia Presbyterian Cornell Weill on 70th Street and York Avenue. And they did some tests and found that I had blockages. And it's probably the scar tissue from being stabbed. It like blocked my arteries in my heart. So that was in 2003. I had a bypass. It was hard. There was times that I thought about suicide because I was in so much pain. You know, I told my mother that I feel like jumping out the window. And she was like, boy, you better have faith in God. And I did. I kept my faith, but the pain was tremendous. But I recovered. And there was many times I went to the hospital where I told them that I felt that my heart was giving me problems, and they just totally dismissed it. No, you're doing too many push-ups, you're doing too much exercise. But I knew it was something else because I know what cardiac pain feels like. I've had it before. So they shuffled me around. Many times they sent me home. I went to the hospital for other ailments, and they would treat that but not treat the heart. And it got to the point where in 2018, I just couldn't catch my breath. I was urinating on myself because I could not catch my breath. My feet were swelling up, my ankles were swelling up like balloons because my body was retaining fluids because of my heart. So they kept me in a hospital in Brooklyn many times. And I asked God for a miracle because I knew in my heart, I knew that I was dying. I could feel it. I could feel the life leaving my body. So I asked God for a miracle. And my mom came up to visit me from her town, from Maryland.
That was our conversation with Don Simmons. This is a part one in the part two series with Don Simmons. Wow, inspiring. I want to say thank you so much for watching and join us next time on the next episode of Health and Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Rosen Green.